All right, so obviously
Okay.
I gave this at the Wisconsin conference as a presentation, um, and it was surprisingly well received. I had people talking to me months after, um, asking questions or just up in arms about that this even happened. So I do want it to be less like a presentation for the purpose of a mentoring Mondays. So feel free to interrupt at any time because if you're getting ahead of me in the presentation, I'll just let you know that I will circle to that and I don't want to talk about it yet. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Um, I don't need to talk about myself anymore. All right. So I just have some inspiring phrases. Um, it's kind of crazy. I never thought I would be giving an ethics discussion to a couple hundred people at a conference ever because I'm a very introverted person, but I'm very passionate about surveying, and I think it is a huge part about being a professional is making these tough decisions and doing what's best for the situation. It might not be what your client wants even, or, but that's something we really, and like, it's also sobering to think like I've aged out of the YSN now, and now I can say like I have almost 20 years of experience surveying. That was another hard thing to swallow, but it's like obviously I haven't done everything right. I don't pretend to be an attorney. Um, I'm, you know, so I'm not an expert. I'm just talking about my unusual experience with a situation that I hope isn't that common.
The hope is.
Yeah, hope. So I had some funnies in here. You know, obviously, if you're on Mentoring Mondays, you probably are on Facebook. You know what Life of a Surveyor group is or the field crew. And there's just some great ethical discussions on there,
Or lack thereof.
or lack thereof, right? Yes. So I asked the first question I asked was, uh, give me a show of hands if you're only here because you have to take an ethics course. And I said, give them a round of applause because they're the only ethical surveyors in this whole room. Because let's face it, most of us don't want to talk about ethics. And while I say this was an ethics course, to me it really wasn't about ethics, but when I think about it, it's because of the decisions that I made in a tough situation and the outcome I got for my client. I don't know if most surveyors would have done this. And I hope you learn a lot from my unfortunate situation. So I'm just gonna quick go through this stuff because I know we have a diversified group here. Um, some of you just taking your exam or going to take your exam. Um, so I kind of went over, in Wisconsin, we have AE6, which lists the criteria of how to be a licensed surveyor. AE7 are the minimum standards of our profession, and AE6 or AE8 talks about our conduct in carrying out our duty. I don't know how different states do that, if it's a statutory thing or if you just have a code of conduct in your state society. And obviously, we all have an idea of right and wrong, but that is more morality. That's not ethics. Ethics is here is the rules that you need to follow, right? Whereas morals can be subjective based on maybe your upbringing, your religious beliefs, your political mindset. So I think it's easy to blur the lines between morals and ethics, but we need ethics because we need some sort of minimum standard, right, to hold us accountable to be a profession. So what is professional ethics? So I said professional is an adjective meaning conforming to the standards of a profession, right? Um, Otherwise you could just talk about what a surveyor is, right? But you add professional, that means something completely different. Whereas ethics are a particular system of principles and rules concerning our duty. And so, like I said, obviously it's different for every state, but I think we all could probably understand the concept that, you know, your workplace has rules, your society might have expectations of conduct, stuff like that. So I'll try not to make it like biased towards Wisconsin, but that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Got another funny for you guys. Um, so why do we have professional ethics? Like I said, it's kind of hard to be a professional if we don't talk about ethics, right? So when we talk about 88 in Wisconsin, we have a duty, right? Our duty is to the public. We have to protect the public. That's why we're licensed as surveyors. So the public has an expectation that this person is licensed, this person should have minimum competency to complete the job that I'm asking them to do. And it also protects our profession, right? Other people, anybody can't just go out and do land surveying. They have to have a license. So it bars anybody that's unqualified from doing our professional services. And I'm going to kind of skip over this because this is Wisconsin specific.
It still might be relevant. I don't know if you want to skip it or not, but it still might be relevant even for some states. There's correlations obviously sometimes, but I don't know
Yeah.
if you want to, you're whatever you feel comfortable with, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess
And
I
there's
guess I,
you
I
got
didn't.
you got Jerry on here. He's from Wisconsin, so
Yeah, that's
you're
true.
talking to a Wisconsin thing.
Jerry better be ethical by now. I don't know if I could change him if he's not.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
I'm a lost cause at this point, so
right. I mean, just put him out to pasture, you know. So
There's
I guess,
always correlations. So yeah.
yeah. So just like in the general sense, like WSOS, like I said, has a code of conduct. 88. If any of you from other states don't have statutory minimum standards, I'd be happy to share with you how Wisconsin is set up with our administrative statutes. Kind of what's the minimum that's expected of a licensed surveyor in Wisconsin. Obviously, if we violate that, we could have a report filed against us by the licensing board. They could review it. They might give us a slap on the hand. They might pull our license depending on the offense. So it's holding us accountable, right? If we don't follow these minimum standards. So I didn't really go into specifics. I think I just kind of refer to them as throughout. And then I get into my story, like the best part. All right. So I kind of laid this out like setting the stage, right? This is all just, if anybody has had the unfortunate experience of going to court, it's just the act, right? It's just a big drama fest. And we're all just characters in the whole scenario. So first I'm going to go over all the maps because we can't talk about a survey without going over the maps, right? I'll talk about the different people that were involved in this situation. And this might be a state by state thing, but in Wisconsin, we record deeds to transfer title, and other documents can be recorded. You know, they have different things that they're called. There's a very strange document that was filed, and it was not appropriate or legal. And we'll talk about that. And then we'll get into what the timeline, all these things that happened. Some of them I didn't know about until later. And looking back, it kind of infuriates me that this even happened. but when it all finally comes together, it's a plot twist that I hope you're shaking your heads. All right, so I get a call like any surveyor, right? Okay, where are you located? What you need done? And it's like, okay, all right, I will research that and get back to you. Right. So the first thing we do is, he's part of a subdivision plat. That was a replat of a different subdivision plat. Well, okay, I'll go back, look at the first plat. So here's the plat. I blurred out the county and the surveyor name because that's irrelevant. Yep, nothing. And I just kind of show the map area. So there's nothing unusual about this map. Looks like a typical subdivision map. But I put in the slides so that if you want to, and also I'm happy to share this slideshow presentation with anybody if you want to look at anything closer after the fact. So this replat was of lot 42 of this subdivision. So this lot here, just showing that for reference. At some point, which is kind of mind-blowing, there's two little pieces that get cut out of this lot, and then it was replatted as this. So a lot 42 of this replatted subdivision and an outlot. I don't know why, and maybe Jerry can chime in about, see, like now we could do a CSM, and as long as it's through the subdivision process, like a CSM would have been appropriate for this, but they redid this one lot, an outlot, as a whole subdivision plat. Because I know when you're changing the boundaries of an exterior plat, you have to go through the same statutory process. Maybe that's why. But this is what we were working with. So that outlot wasn't part of the survey, just lot 42. Kind of unusual shaped parcel. This guy wanted to cut it and put a little dividing line here, make it two parcels. For reference, this is down by Hatfield in Clark County, kind of well, I guess I won't say which county. It was the county to the south, but a more higher value area. And as like that little narrow part, he's like, well, this doesn't make sense to leave it two lots. I could probably get, or one lot, I could probably get more money as two lots. Okay, cool. We'll retrace the survey, nothing weird. Put the little dividing line in, went through review. Yeah. So at the time, if anybody doesn't know, I subcontract with TrueMark Surveying. You'll have to go back into Mentoring Mondays if you want to know about that. So I was subcontracted for TrueMark Surveying, and I was the surveyor that stamped this map. So like I said, this client who owned lot 42, he's the one that wanted it divided. Obviously, he listed it with the realtor. He's just looking to make money on this deal. Pretty common. I think most of us have worked, if we do private boundary surveying, you often work with realtors and like I said, might be kind of more state specific, but just throwing all this out there. So a lot of times there is a planning and zoning department in our different counties. So, there's usually some kind of administrative assistant that kind of manages who you need to talk to. There's a zoning administrator that his job is to review your maps to see if they're compliant with local zoning. We are fortunate in a lot of our counties in Wisconsin to have a county surveyor. He reviews our CSMs, certified survey maps. So that's another term for a minor land division in Wisconsin. He reviews our maps to make sure we're compliant with Chapter 236. There's a register of deeds that's responsible for recording legal documents. There's a zoning and land information committee. So a lot of times I don't deal with this committee with a normal land division. unless there's some sort of special circumstance, but they have extra authority if there's an unusual situation, if a map is referred there. A lot of counties have corporate councils that, represent the best interest of the county.
Before you move on, Nettie,
Yeah.
one thing going back, so you had made a reference that a lot of people have been working with realtors lately, and I know it's happened. I've seen it happen now twice on Facebook, and I know it's happened to one other person. But while you talked about working for realtors, it's the realtors or people acting to be realtors are coming in and signing contracts and then paying for said services or the deposit of said services, and then will call you the next morning and tell you that they need a refund on their deposit that they just made you. And so I know I saw it twice on Facebook, and it's happened to somebody else as well. So be careful when you're doing that work for the realtors, because they're starting to sound a lot more intelligent and they know what questions to ask, and get you to sign a contract, and then they call you the next morning to refund. So I guess it'd be maybe, and goes into almost some contract law about no refunds or something like that aspect of it that we possibly need to add to our stuff. But there's some scams going around currently that are kind of driven towards surveyors. So just a heads up on that. You can see it on some of the Facebook posts as well. But sorry.
Yeah, definitely. And
Yep.
in a lot of our counties actually have in their ordinance, we have to survey with the permission of the landowner. So when I say like working with, like this is something that might be a word of advice for people, is if a realtor's like, hey, I need this survey done, well, who are you representing? The buyer or the seller? Like you need to talk to the actual owner, current owner of the property in order to do the survey. So whether it's required or not, that could be really good practice, is to make sure you establish a contract with that person, not a realtor. And yeah, I would definitely support, like, I mean, once that retainer's paid,
Yeah.
gone,
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting what's happening. So
yeah, it's super unfortunate. So this is kind of like a two-part thing. I'll kind of explain in the timeline, but so all those people were kind of like more when I did that survey that I just showed you. And after I complete, and like I said, I'll get into it more later, but just so you understand the context, I'm trying to say everybody that's involved. So after we did this survey for client B, we had client K come along, and he had us do a survey in that original subdivision that I originally showed. Like I said, in the timeline, I'll explain it. I just want you guys to be aware of all the different people involved. And he has an attorney. Then there's another realtor. Speaking of realtors that are problems, this was one that was a huge problem. So she's not only a realtor, but she's also the town clerk. Explain that one. So there's the original plat again, and client K asked us to survey this lot. And then here's just a real quick peek at this addendum. And I guess I'd be interested, as you guys are looking at this on the screen, if this is a type of document that is pretty normal in your state, or if you want to chime in as to like the different documents that can be recorded. So this was recorded as an addendum to the original subdivision plat. That's not a thing at all. This was before Renee Powers retired, so that's not a thing. So it was super confusing when I saw this document. What is this? So I will get into it more later, but I just want to show the front page of it right now. Get your wheels turning. So now we'll get into the timeline. So I did this survey for client B. as you saw, divided up. He puts it for sale and he sells lot 5, so that easterly piece. Okay. I don't really know this is going because as surveyors, right? We do the survey, we get paid. Not that we don't care, but I mean we're moving on to other things. I ain't seeing like if my client's selling his lots or whatever. So all seems like it's going fine with that. So while this is going on, while he's marketing these lots, we had been retained by client K to say that lot 32. And as a habit, and I would give this word of advice to anybody, anytime we're doing a land division, you know, if it's required or not, it's a good idea to talk to the zoning administrator or any review authorities, competent review authorities, to see, hey, here's a quick sketch of what my client is interested in doing. Is this permissible? Will this work? And so that's what I did. In this case, I said, hey, the guy owns this much acres, this lot, he'd like to divide it. And he's like, yeah, the minimum age is 1.5 acres. You could divide it in up to 3 pieces, whatever. And we're like, okay, cool, you know, great. So we do the survey, we get the map drafted, and we submit it to the county. So, and again, if it's different in your state and you want to chime in, you're more than welcome. But like I said, the zoning administrator and the county surveyor of a county has one often are the two main people that review our maps along with anybody else with review or objecting authority. So pretty standard operating procedure, nothing weird. Well, except it was a little bit special because I did create an easement to one of the back proposed lots. So any easements had to be reviewed by committee. So we missed the meeting for August, like I think it was like August 20 something. So we missed that meeting. So it's going to be on the September agenda. Okay, fine, cool, whatever. I told my client, well, you'll have to wait. Okay, whatever. Don't hear anything. After September, I was like, okay, well, did they not like it? Like, I mean, but I'm busy too, so I'm like worrying too much, but I didn't hear anything. But this is what was going on behind my back. Have you? I feel backstabbed after I researched this for the presentation. So the county surveyor says in August, TrueMark Surveying sent me a proposed CSM consisting of lot 32 and Emerald Lake North subdivision plat in the town of Adams. The survey proposed splitting lot 32 into 3 smaller lots. Shortly after, so that realtor that I told you that was the town clerk, for some reason she thought it was her job to let them know she thought she remembered something about a meeting in the town and that those lots weren't supposed to be subdivided, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, but I don't know this is going on. So she felt like so instead of talking to me or my client, she went straight to the county. And the county admin researched, and sure enough, pulled the committee meeting minutes and in the preliminary plat review in May of 2000, when that original plat was being reviewed, there was a motion that the minimum lot size was supposed to be 3 acres or greater. They didn't want a high concentration of lots. So at the time of the final plat, you know, obviously there's a bunch of review authorities, a bunch of signatures on a plat, and all the lots on the plat are more than 3 acres if you go back and look at that subdivision plat. But here's the big but. No reference was made on the map. So how would anybody know that? There's no reference on the map. There's no covenants or restrictions on the deeds. Nothing. Nothing is ever mentioned about this. Go ahead, Rob.
Nothing in the conditions of approval of the map that would be a separate document.
No, like the only way you would know this is if you went in the preliminary plat meeting minutes. And who do you normally do that as part of your research?
Well, if they don't end up on the conditions of approval, then they're not, and they don't end up on the map, then it's not part of the deal.
Right. So my question is like, so like in my mind, and I don't hear about this till later, obviously, but when I did finally hear about it later in the timeline, I was like, how is this enforceable? And the county surveyor and zoning administrator actually agreed with me verbally, but on the record, of course. Yeah, it gets interesting. And so obviously they didn't want any further subdivision of lots, like a simple freaking note. And so I guess this is another thing is, as surveyors, if something is important or a restriction on a minor land division or a subdivision plat, like our notes are important. You know,
Another thing to consider is that how it was worded, because that may have been a condition of approval of that plat, but that would not necessarily restrict anything that happened to those lots after that. So a 3 acre
right.
lot could be subdivided into smaller pieces. That has nothing to do with the condition of that plat. So it depends on how the wording was.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jerry. I'm glad you brought that up because I would have to, and the meeting minutes are here later on. We can look at them. But it would be interesting to know, to look at that again from that perspective. Because just because it was approved with no further subdivision doesn't mean that after it's approved and down the road, they couldn't further subdivide it. So,
But
no,
I'm sorry, can I ask a quick question? And
yes,
there's no they did not notify you of all of the stuff that was going on in this meeting?
no, I was not notified of this.
Oh,
Yeah, it's great.
okay.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
yeah, yeah, really. Yeah.
So evidently Wisconsin doesn't do things quite the same way as Nevada. We have zoning for everything, and you can look or go to the county and look at their zoning for any parcel in the county, and it will tell you if it's dividable and what the standards are that you need to meet to
Yes.
create a new
And
lot.
yes,
And
we do.
it seems to me the zoning department should have advised you of any problem they had with that from the get-go. And evidently they didn't catch all this either.
Right. Yep. And that's exactly the problem is there is a zoning ordinance and we looked at the zoning ordinance and the zoning administrator told me, yeah, you can,
Okay.
yep, 1.5 acres is the minimum. You can, yeah, if you can come up with some configurations that meet zoning, yeah, that's approvable. So to your saying, there is zoning and there is ordinances, but if this subdivision was special, and if it was so special, they should have either updated the ordinance, recorded some kind of covenant, or just put a note on the map saying that. And I don't know how enforceable a note on a map would be, but at least
Pretty
it would
enforceable.
give a big heads up to anybody that looked at the map saying, oh, this was approved with this restriction. So, like, as I say, so Cody, the county surveyor, he's the one saying this in his report. So he's saying no reference to this requirement is made on the face of the plat with the minimum lot size. No statement of no further subdivision was noted. There's no document with this requirement recorded with the register of deeds. So a title search would not be able to find this information requirement. So he's very factual in saying like, how is any reasonable surveyor supposed to know this? and how are we supposed to enforce it, as a county surveyor? And so then, like you said, so I already had a map approved from the subdivision. So this also brought up questions on my previous CSM 4286. This was reviewed and approved of December 2020, recorded January 2021. So he's talking about that CSM that we already approved. Now that we discovered these meeting minutes, so this is where that addendum comes in. They took these meeting minutes, recorded it as an addendum to the plat. So I don't know what he means by we. I don't know if it's the county surveyor and the zoning department administrator. I don't know who the we is, but this document got recorded. And they also sought the advice of the corporate councils. And so corporate councils now aware of this situation. They're researching it and will get back to us. So what must have happened is at the meeting, they tabled my CSM. See, I don't normally go to these meetings because this is very routine stuff. I was just getting an easement approved. I had no reason to believe that anything strange was going on. So I don't hear anything, but I was like, okay, maybe they need another month to think about it. I don't really know. And my client was busy with other things, so he wasn't really pressuring at me at all. It was kind of like, just do this as you can. At the next meeting, let's see, I'm just trying to move this out of my way so I can read. Okay. At the next meeting, corporate counsel continued to look at Emerald Lake plat issues. They're reviewing the plat information. So mind you, they've been looking at this a whole month. I don't know what they still need to review, but whatever, I'm not an attorney. And determined that the 3-acre minimum standards to be upheld. So these corporate councils are like, well, if that's what the meeting minutes say, that's what we got to do. Okay, but how? So one lot had a certified survey map created in January 2021 that created 2 parcels. So remember that CSM I showed you? So he sold lot 5, but lot 4 is still not sold, and it's less than 3 acres. So what are they going to do about it? They approved it, right? They approved it. So the complications, that's the survey has been recorded. Well, yeah, corporate counsel is reviewing if the county can be an applicant for a variance request for this one parcel that slipped through the cracks and was approved for division during the certified survey map review process, awaiting her feedback on how to move forward. So this is the zoning administrator that put this in the report. So you know what? They messed up, right? They approved something. They realized, if we're supposed to hold this 3-acre minimum, we shouldn't have approved this, but we already approved it. So we should apply for a variance, just get this one lot compliant and don't allow any further subdivision, right? That seems like a reasonable compromise and solution. But again, I don't know any of this. Like Summer mentioned, like it's wild that they did not talk to me that this was all going on. Maybe they were afraid of what I would do. I have no idea. So I'm glad George brought up. So this is the zoning ordinance, little snippets from it that apply. So, there is rules. It's not the Wild West. There is rules. I looked them up. We're following the rules. Like if you look through here, the main highlights are, all proposed lots are to be a minimum of 1.5 acres in size. Okay. Unless a local municipality has passed an ordinance, which is more restrictive, the town does not have an ordinance. Specific county code of ordinances or state administrative code allowing for lots to be below. So this is only talking about if we want smaller lot sizes. Or a variance is granted by the county board of adjustment by following the required public hearing procedure. So could get a variance but we're over an acre and a half. So we're not doing anything wrong. So the other thing I want to point out, if you look on the left side of the slide, when referred by the division, so the division is referring to the department. So like my map was referred to the committee because it had an easement on it. So when it's referred, the committee has 40 days from the date of the filing of the map, unless the time is extended by agreement with the subdivider. Failure to act within the 40-day time limit shall constitute approval. So this is important later. All right. So here's my controversial CSM. Now you can kind of look at the map. So if you look at all three of my lots, they're more than an acre and a half, which is the minimum lot size. I have a 66-foot ingress egress easement for the back lot that doesn't have road access. It meets all the minimum standards of Chapter 236. So, you know, like, why can't they approve it? Because it's new discovery, right? See, I'm gonna move you guys again. You keep getting in the way of my slides. So just to like alleviate the confusion, so these meetings are happening. I have heard absolutely nothing. Not an email, not a voicemail. I've heard nothing from the county. And so I contact my client's attorney. I'm like, the county is not getting back to us on this. I said, I don't know what's going on. I'm starting to get a bad feeling, but it's been over 40 days and they have not responded to me. Have they responded to you? And he said, no, they haven't responded to me. I asked my client, did they contact you in any way? He said, no. I'm like, well, 40 days is up. Just gonna go record this map, right? Yeah, that did not go well. Oh yeah, so I put a slide in. So I should record my map, right? I guess what would you guys do at this point?
I think it's definitely depends on different counties. Like, I mean, we can't record maps till we have signatures from different county jurisdictions, and depending on the style of map and even utility agents and stuff like that. So we could never do that.
But if there was if it
I
said in the
know.
ordinance that they failed to act,
Yeah, no, I get that. I do get that.
is that a common thing in most areas, like a failure to act clause?
We do have review time period standards in Nevada, and by the way, Nevada is still the Wild West these days. But yeah, and in fact, I've even dealt with a county surveyor here that couldn't get approval from a health department, for example, on a lot. And he finally got to the point where the health department never reviewed anything timely. He finally said, "Okay, you guys have 2 weeks. If I don't hear from you in 2 weeks, I'm recording the map without your signatures," which is probably the way it should have been done. They started actually reviewing things. They're still not good though.
Yeah, but I mean, there has to be some sort of accountability for this.
Yeah.
So Nettie, how much is like if the lot was split, how much are those individual parcels worth?
I don't know what vacant land really goes for in Hatfield because there really isn't that much available. I can tell you that most properties down there, I guess I do, okay, one vacant lot I did survey sold for over 200,000. And that's for vacant lot, no utilities, I mean electricity.
So this is a couple $100,000 deal.
Yes.
At least.
And you know, do you have a land use attorney specialist that you're familiar with that would take this up? Because this sounds like a slam dunk lawsuit against the county.
Yeah.
And
a
that is
forced filing.
Yeah, and that's almost what happened here. I, so I will get into that.
At
Um,
least we get
I
the end of the
wish it
story.
went to court. I wish it went to court.
Uh,
I don't normally say that. So I tried to record my map. I love the registered deed. She is great. I have a lot of respect for her. So in no way, like, she's just doing her job. Because like Trent brought up, we're supposed to have that required signature from zoning to record that map. She's like, you don't have the application, you don't have the signature. I said, they failed to act. It's been 40 days. Like it says so right in the ordinance. She's like, she's like, I never recorded a map that wasn't approved. So I'm not blaming her for not doing her job. You know, in my opinion, she should have. I'm glad she didn't record it in hindsight, but I was very frustrated about the situation because, like I said, I've heard nothing, and now the register of deeds won't let me record my map. Um, and I don't want to cause conflict because this is a county I work in a lot. So I'm just like, why is all of a sudden everything going sideways? So I'm just like, after hearing nothing from zoning, I'm like, okay, I let my client's attorney know, I'm like, they won't let me record the map. I'm just going to contact zoning and find out what is going on. So I contact zoning. I'm like, hey, it's been over 40 days. I can't record the CSM. Like, what is going on? And they're like, oh yeah, you can't record this, you can't do this CSM, and here's why. And they give me a copy of the addendum.
And the addendum was,
I think I show that in a later slide.
there it is.
So here's the email that I got from the zoning admin, and I think it's kind of hilarious. So she's like, attached, you'll find the plat of Emerald Lake North. Addendum is what she meant to say, which includes the minutes from the meeting. So what the addendum is, it had that title page that I showed you, and they literally took the meeting minutes and attached it to that title page and recorded it. So we'll get into that in specifics later, but yeah. You will now be able to find this under the Survey Record Search app. I have never seen a recorded document under the Survey Record Search app. This is for searching maps of survey, not registered deeds documents.
So in California, subdivision maps go through the process at the county or the city if it's in the city. But let's say they go through the process at the county and then they are they are sent on to the California Department of Real Estate.
Oh. Yeah, so like the best way I can describe this, Rob, what this document is, so what should have been filed is like an affidavit of correction, saying this note was left off or something like that. And it could have been, and I'll get into that later, but an addendum to a plat is not a document that's any kind of normally referenced document in Wisconsin. I guess I've never seen that. And I talked to Rent later on. I'll get into that too. So I better not get ahead of myself. Okay. So the cute part of this email, the reason I shared it is we are waiving any fees for the attached records due to the circumstances. Yeah, you just like cost my client like potentially $500,000, but you're waiving a $3 fee. Thank you so much. You know, like, are you serious right now? I was, yeah. So let's talk about this addendum document. Okay, so like I said, if your state's different, you're welcome to chime in and say how recordable documents are in your state. But in our state, there's supposed to be a title. So it's supposed to be a standard type of document, you know, like whether it's an easement, warranty deed, quitclaim deed, blah, 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 whatever, right? Title, what is it? 3 by 3 inch space, that goes back to the days of, there's still some registered deeds that do it the old way, but it's the reserved space for the recording information. Now it's
Right.
mostly like a tiny digital stamp in the corner, but whatever, every county does things a little differently. You're supposed to have a return address. So when the document's recorded, where does a copy get returned to? Or now the originals actually get returned because they digitally scan it and then send the original back. There's supposed to be a PIN number, which is a parcel identification number. You guys probably have something similar to that. So what real estate parcel is this affecting? Okay, all those things were on there. Great. It should be clear, legible, and reproducible. Yep. All right. Complete legal descriptions of the property. This is kind of questionable. It just said lots 1 through 42 of Emerald Lake North Plat. I guess that's kind of a complete enough description. We kind of know what they're talking about. They should have said, town, section, town range. If you guys are familiar with the PLS estate, you understand how that works. Here's the part that was weird, right? Original signatures with notary acknowledgement. There's no signature anywhere on this document. If you go back and look at that title page, there's no signature. And that's required. Like, who's enforcing this document? Who's authorizing, who recorded this document? We don't know. Who drafted this document? Name of the drafter. It's required. If you look up the Wisconsin Register of Deeds site, name of the drafter. There's no name. Like, who did this? So the only thing I know is that the return address is literally to the courthouse. All right, so who in the courthouse is doing this shady stuff? Like, what is going on?
I'm sorry, was it given like a recordation number? I mean, it must have had
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was recorded as a document, but in order to be recorded, there should have been a signature and there should have been a drafted by.
Right, okay. Totally makes sense. Yeah, this whole thing is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, it gets better. I try not to get worked up about this. I mean, this was 4 years ago. I should get over it, but I put a little funny in there to give a break, right?
While you're on this one, Nettie, John threw in the chat. There's a couple of things good in the chat, but John said a good idea in a zoning review committee does not equate to an ordinance passed through the public review process and adopted by elected officials. So
100% agree.
yeah, it goes really well with
Excellent
what you're
comment.
talking about. So
Appreciate that. Yeah, interrupt me anytime with the chats because I'm not paying attention to those. Yeah, I had to keep people entertained, all right? I didn't know like so like what is going on? So obviously, as that was mentioned in the meeting minutes that I didn't even look at, right? I didn't know about these meeting minutes and what was said in there. So not only is my current CSM that I'm trying to get approved being attacked, but my old CSM that I already recorded that I think everything's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. Okay, so I send an email to Attorney R. So he's the one representing my client K. And I let him know, here's what I heard from the realtor that's trying to sell lot 4 yet for my previous client. So I share with him the situation. All right, Attorney R. Today I received an email from Realtor J for client B who I previously surveyed, lot 42 of Emerald Lake North, second edition, nearby but different plat. And this is another important thing. This was a replat. It's a whole new plat. So, like, do the restriction, even if there was approved 3 acres, does that carry over? Like a covenant, I would say carried over, a restriction carried over, but does something in the meeting minutes carry over to a whole different plat? A whole replat. You know, they're trying to apply it to this plat. This is a new plat. It's a second edition. It's a replat over top. So that's another side thing. So I divided a 2-acre lot off. Since we were formed by the county at the time that the lot size, minimum lot size was 1.5 acres or greater, right? We looked at the ordinance. We're surveyors. We do all those things. It went through county review. It was approved and recorded. All parties, include the county zoning administrator and the county surveyor, seemed to act in good faith at that time. But now the county is forcing him to change it or seek a variance without offering compensation for the error. Like, this is mind-blowing. Is like when I got that email from the Rear Time, I'm like, what is going on? Because I didn't know about any of this stuff. The CSM that I was working on, an application is attached for your reference and use. I spoke on the phone with the county zoning administrator, and he stated corporate counsel is standing by the minutes, which when the town decided to limit the acreage to 3 acres. I questioned this, asked for a copy of the minutes to see for myself what was said. They are attached. Interestingly, I was provided a copy of a document that was actually recorded. A reproduced copy of the plat with the meeting minutes attached as an addendum, quote, quote. Because again, it's not a thing. Check out the recording date and who recorded it. Not sure if this was a properly formatted document or legal to record in this way, or what this type of document actually does. So I'm asking as a surveyor, like, you're an attorney, what does this addendum actually mean? Is this like even legit? What does this actually do? Because, so this doesn't only affect my current client, Kay, but this was all of the lots 1 through 42. They recorded this document. What is this doing to all the other landowners? Were they even aware of this? Did they make them aware of this?
Yeah, this is at least $10 million, $20 million in damages.
I mean, there's 42 lots in the subdivision.
Right. If it's $500,000 per, then there's 21 million in damages. So
yeah,
that means that in the future there's 42 other opportunities for this thing to happen again. Because unless all 42 of those lots know that restriction exists,
right,
on either in their deed or on the plat that their deed references, then there's nothing preventing somebody from later on trying to subdivide the parcel into smaller pieces. So is this going to happen each time one of those situations comes up?
And funny thing is, a surveyor that owns a lot in that subdivision was in my presentation. Yeah, that was fun. And so I'm asking the attorney here. This is where you come in with your expertise. My previous client authorized and the current client authorized me to have you review this matter, see what course of action should be taken. So this is where my current client has plenty of money to burn. It's always burning a hole in his pocket. That's why I do a lot of surveys for him. He's like, he would like litigate this just for the fun of it. I mean, that's where this was headed. And then I gave my 2 cents because I can't resist. And for reference, I've gone head to head with this attorney. Like, we're not always friends, but he makes good arguments. As a side opinion, the county is acting very unprofessional. This is poor procedure in response to their situation. As a surveyor trying to record a certified survey map, I rely on the county, right? We rely on the county to guide us on proper land division procedure. So all parties know their option, usually before investing in the land decision. Maybe even potentially buying the land, right? We were not informed upfront of this requirement. We're not responded to within the set time frame, and even afterwards, we're not given their decision until I asked for it. Just I so what do we do? I have some questions up here. Some of these we might have kind of touched on already. You can feel free to answer any of them, or I'll just quick go through them. So, like as surveyors, let's see, I can't quite see.
I was gonna say that I think the second one goes back to John Stahl's point was, does the zoning administrator have the authority to move forward with that addendum? Yeah, this one.
Yeah,
Denial based on a recorded addendum. And to John's point, if it wasn't through public review process and made changes in the zoning requirements, then obviously not. So
no, so they didn't have the right to deny my CSM, right? So, I mean, I still to this day don't technically have an answer from them. They never responded. Should my CSM have been allowed to be recorded? I've talked to, I had a couple registered deeds sitting in this session, and they like, at first I thought this was like a registered deeds bashing session, and then I realized, and then they're like, well, they really enjoyed it, and they're like, yeah, they're like, our job is to record documents in recordable format, or not record documents if they're not in recordable format. So it's like, my CSM wasn't recorded, even though it was in recordable format. And this addendum, which was not in recordable format, and it's not even a type of document that's recognized in the register of deeds, was recorded. Like I said, this is all going sideways. And that's the next question, should the register of deeds recorded this addendum? And I'm guessing she was afraid of losing her job. Like, I'm guessing corporate counsel said, record this document. And she's like, okay. I don't blame her for doing that. As a surveyor, the meeting minutes are online. Should I have looked at the meeting minutes to find out what was going on? Honestly, I was just so busy, I didn't really think about it. I've never had a situation like this before. And I did start opening up the conversation, like what documents should have been recorded. But we can also talk about that later because I bring that up. So any other questions before we keep going?
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, my question is there like some sort of, and I know we've talked about this grace period or whatever, this review period. I think it was 40 days. Is that like a standard, like, period that you're supposed to be checking in for these types of, I don't know, random, addendums that are coming up or whatever it might be? Because we run into that in Texas where there could be a lag in the recordation process. So there's not access to the record, but this seems a bit different. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that does, like, almost like with title insurance, like a gap period, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, should we as surveyors be looking at our property for things that are recorded against it? I mean, a lot of times if you're working with a client, and just to put this in perspective, so normally I hear back from the county within like 5 business days. I email them the map. They tell me, yep, looks good, or yes, it's approved, but make these changes. The only reason this took a little longer because it had to go to a meeting minute for that easement. Otherwise, this is normally a really quick routine thing. Like, I'm very spoiled. I realize that there's other, and just like the 40 days isn't a rule of thumb for everybody. This was just their county. Some counties have 90 days. Some have 60 days. It's whatever their ordinance says. just to answer that question as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but that part we all agree is pretty standard, that there's going to be a bit of an overlap there.
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess, do I always look at things that, like, if I'm working on a job, I guess I don't go back and research it to see if anything's reported against it.
Yeah.
Because it's happening like within 2 weeks time period,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that completely makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if it was like a subdivision plat that took several months, it might be prudent to make sure that nothing else happened against the property that you're doing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Awesome. Good question. All right. Did anybody else have a question?
I think you're good. I think Rob just kind of threw in the chat was, could be a good ethics complaint against corporate counsel and the county surveyor, but I'm sure we'll get to that in a minute as well. But
yeah, I mean, here's where I was feeling at this moment. Not about my feelings, but just like, here's what I was strategizing. My client is potentially going to sue them, right? So I'm not going to talk to them because I don't want to do anything to damage our case. So, yeah, because it was definitely in my mind, like, there's something screwy going on, should report them for what they're doing, but I'm not gonna open that can if we're going to sue them. I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut and do whatever they ask me to do.
I'm sorry. I have another. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Is there an ethical consideration for, like, if you had um other landowners that wanted to bring you on board to go into some sort of legal action? Is there a legal consideration there for you in Wisconsin?
Like client privilege or like
Meaning, like,
confidentiality?
yeah, well, if your client, is thinking about taking up suit, right, against the
Mhm.
county, is that understanding correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if next door neighbor, lot 41 or whatever, um, they also wanted to utilize your services and then also came to the same conclusion, is there a conflict of interest or any sort of ethical repercussion in that?
Absolutely not. I guess my opinion, and if you read through the 88 Code of Conduct in Wisconsin, our duty is first and foremost to the public. It's not even to my client. Obviously, if my client doesn't want me sharing certain information about the project that I'm working on, I won't do that because that's what's, moral, right? Morally right to me to not share that information. I'm not ethically bound. There's no uh uh not like an attorney where if that helps breach the difference. Like, no, I mean, today I have an adverse possession situation and I'm working for both sides currently.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. We run into weird stuff like this in Texas a lot, and so we just, have to make sure that the survey is sold, or we're recertifying, if you will, to the right party, but we can represent the world from a survey standpoint. It's not client specific, but I'm just wondering, when it goes into a legal situation like this, how that works, because that seems um, like there is a pretty big case that potentially could come up there.
Yeah, and I think the biggest important aspect of if you're in that situation, like the situation I'm in now is probably a great example where I did a survey for a party and then we sent a letter to the neighbor letting him know about the survey, and then they talk to us about the survey. And I think the biggest thing is to communicate with your existing client that you're talking to this other party, and now they retained us for their services, and to make him aware that, he's our previous and current client, and now we have them as a client as well, that we are unbiased professionals, but we're working for both of you, but we're only going to disclose if there's certain information you don't want us to disclose, you just let us know that. And I think that's just a moral thing to do. We're not ethically bound that way, if that makes sense.
Totally. Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. No, I think communication is vital.
George has his hand up too. He's got something.
Yeah.
Okay, let me muddy the water a little bit. Suppose that this survey, this subdivision that you were working in was recorded back in the 1970s. What chance would you have of finding meeting notices for what went on with the review and approval of that plat by the county back then?
None.
And I would think all 42 lot owners in that subdivision would be very willing to jump on board with this as a class action thing against the county, because none of them were notified of this restriction either by a note on the map or a restriction on the deed where they got their property. They have no clue what's going on here. All of a sudden, you don't know what their plans were, but they still are being held to a limitation on their property rights that they had no way of knowing about.
Right. And so basically the only reason that anybody knew about this is because the town clerk happens to be a realtor. That's the only reason this got discovered to begin with, even in the digital age. Because nobody is looking through meeting minutes of plats to see what the discussion was, because we go by the recorded information, what's actually there. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I don't think you're muddying anything. I think you're saying the sentiment that a lot of us are thinking.
Well, I know the records here in Washoe County where I live get poorer and poorer the farther back in time you go. And in fact, it was not until the 60s that they really put in some requirements that we borrowed from California into our statutes for surveying that made this a situation where hopefully this kind of thing doesn't happen. But all they had to do was say, put a note on the map. That's all they had to do. It's that simple.
Yeah, and so like, do we look back on the original surveyor and say, dude, why didn't you put a note on the map? You knew this was important part of the approval. Yeah, why they all signed the map the way it looked, right? They signed the map. Their signatures, the town is on the map, the county's on the map, everybody's on the map. The note's not on the map. Like anyone could have said, hey, I ain't signing it until the town could have said, hey, we're not signing this until this note is on the map because we don't want further subdivision.
Well, who signed for the commission?
I mean, you can go.
I mean,
I don't know if I shared the whole map.
That whole committee could be sued. I mean, individually and as a committee. I mean,
yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and lawyers love this.
Oh yeah, and yeah, this attorney was ready, and my client was ready to sue, and then he's like, just forget it, and he sells his lot. He's like, I made more money. I made money off of it anyways. I'll pay you for your survey. You did the work. You did nothing wrong. He moves on. But that leaves my previous client still in a bad situation, right? Like, we know the county is gunning after that previous CSM that I did.
Yeah, they want your previous client to fix their error at
exactly.
their client's expense. That's ridiculous. They could at least waive the requirement for the fees and the review and grant the variance. I mean, that's the least they could do. Or they could just say, hey, do an adjustment with the remaining big lot to make this lot comply, and we'll approve it.
100% agree. And that's That's one thing I do suggest.
So
So,
your client that decided, the client K that just decided, oh, screw it, I'm going to sell it anyway and move on.
yep. So he sold
He,
his lot as is. Yep.
yeah.
Didn't divide it.
So he is out the difference between what he could have sold both lots for and what he sold the single lot for. And the other client is still over a barrel on the other map.
Correct.
And the two of them could be the principals in the class action lawsuit representing everybody in that subdivision.
Right. And they could have sent letters to
Get
all these
get
owners.
triple damages, right?
Yeah.
So your attorney could be looking at, let's see, well, we said 21 million, but really if they have um triple damages on that, then $60 million lawsuit, I wouldn't walk away from that.
Right. I mean, this, like I said, it's one case. I wish it would have went to court just because it gets better right here. Just you guys are not you're gonna be blown.
Wow.
Yeah. So January 12th, so like about a year after I recorded this map the right way, I did everything right. The zoning administrator files an affidavit of non-compliance. Again, I don't know what that is. Okay. Yeah. Let's see, I think I show a picture of it. Oh no, I talk about it first. Okay. So there's a potential buyer for lot 4. So they are wondering about, so what's the deal with lot 4? This county issued this non-compliance, right? What does this mean? This affidavit of non-compliance. So the real property lister provides this buyer with the ordinance that here's the restriction. So basically what they're saying is your lot 4 is not compliant, right? Because it's not 3 acres, according to these meeting minutes for a completely different plat. Okay? Following all that. And then, yeah.
Sorry.
And they say, you can't sell it until you call it an outlot. Yeah. Okay. So the buyer's like, okay, well, I'm fine. If it's an outlot, what can I do with it? Maybe it's still fine because, different areas like in the Clark County where I currently reside, you can do a lot of things with an outlot. It's basically that it's a non-compliant lot. Like, there is restrictions like, for your principal dwelling and stuff, but you could, put a little cabin on it, maybe have a privy even, like there's just different rules, right? Well, this county is super strict. They're like, no, you can't even spend the night there in a tent. That's basically what she told him. So they're like, well, the buyer's like, well, what can we, like, how can this even be sold? Like, how do we switch it to an outlot, right? Because this is a realtor. So a letter from court counsel says lot 4 has got to be designated as outlot in order to be sold. Okay. So the realtor's like, okay, this needs to be an outlot. Now, what do we do? I was like, I never had to redo something that I got approved and recorded as a lot, and now call it an outlot. That seems crazy. I said, honestly, I'm not going to give you an answer. I mean, I'll quote you what it would cost to resurvey it, because I'm going to have to redo my map because lot 5's already gone, so I have to redraft this all and re-get it approved. So I said it's still, unfortunately, that I'm not even setting irons, but there's work involved. I'm like, you should get a legal opinion on this situation because this doesn't seem right. Right? This is very wrong.
Nettie, can you? There was a thing in the chat. Can you describe what the outlot means again?
So, like a lot is something that you can put a principal structure on. Obviously, that's something that's developable. An outlot usually is something that you can't like live on, have a primary dwelling place. It's just basically a general term for a substandard lot. And different counties might have different rules as to what you can do with it. Some you can do a lot of things with, and others, like in this county, you can't do very much with at all. Like you can't even put a structure or improvement on it.
Hmm.
Seems weird that anybody would even create one, but maybe
Yeah.
people have their reasonings. But
I mean, sometimes like a good example might be like, say if there was an encroachment problem and they didn't want to pay for a whole survey, let's just like create this little outlot to attach it. So it's usually like a helper parcel, right? It's not usually something that's standalone or sold standalone, to the substandard. So it does have use like,
Slop. It's like the slop a little bit.
yeah.
yeah, or it could be like a stormwater area, something like a easement area. You could actually plat it as a lot. So stuff like that. It's functional, not that people can really improve.
Seems like somebody could make a good chunk of change in this county, rolling up to a planning commission meeting with a truckload of pitchforks and torches for sale.
Yeah, I'm honestly, because honestly, the realtor was so mad at this point. He's like, I got enough money. I'm gonna sue the county. He was so
Yeah.
mad about it.
Well, how rich is it? How rich is this county? Do they have? I mean, could a case like this they could go broke?
I would possibly. I mean,
Would a $60 million judgment
I mean,
turn over the county? Probably not.
probably not, but
No.
it would make news, man, and somebody would definitely not be reelected somewhere.
Yeah.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah.
That's where a commission ought to be all fired, and especially if it's the same one that approved the original map with a
Yeah. We will get to that part.
unknown
We'll get to that
condition.
part.
What?
We'll get to that part. What happens
Okay.
to all these
Oh,
bad
but wait,
people?
there's more.
But I wanted to tell you all something. We had a case like this in Houston, and I remember going to the city surveyor, also named Summer at the time, and we were like, "What in the world is going on?" And it's a different situation, but not so dissimilar. And she said, we'd rather take it lawsuit by lawsuit than fix the problem. And I
Wow.
was like, that was the answer. And I was like,
Wow.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like if this was a similar situation, like this is our hill, we're gonna die on it, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's cheaper for them to just deal with each lawsuit than to try to resolve the bigger problem,
And I think this was honestly a situation where nobody asked the right people on how to fix this problem. Because honestly, my client, if he was just informed about this, because this addendum was recorded prior to me submitting this preliminary CSM, they could have just said, hey, we discovered this. We're not sure how to remedy this. This was not intended to be divided. And a lot of harm could have been saved, right? Because I'm sure my client, if he found that out, he'd been like, okay, that sucks. I'll just sell it then. Right? He wouldn't take,
right.
yeah. Instead, he's got months wasted over the best time to sell this property into this. So I quote for this resurvey. Obviously, this client is not thrilled about paying me to survey this again and designate it as an outlaw, right? So realtors like, can't you just like file an affidavit like they did and just say it's an outlot? And I was like, I don't think that you can just do an affidavit of correction to change a lot to an outlot. That's like a whole different entity. That's a whole different description. I don't think I can do that. But I don't know. I don't know. So I guess what do we do when we don't know? So in Wisconsin, she's sadly retired now. So there's a big gaping hole. We just have one guy at our state plat review level, but if any of you know Renee Powers, she knows the Wisconsin statutes. Like she could quote anything, anytime. Like she has all the answers, right? So I was just like, all right, I've had enough of this situation and dealing with it on my own. Renee, here's the whole thing. I gave her everything from the beginning. Like what I said, I don't even know where I am anymore. I don't even know like how to be a surveyor anymore. Like this is just completely like I've never had a situation this desperate before. Like so she's like, "Hey, I have a conference. I'll get back to you next week." I'm like, "Great, awesome." So she gives me a phone call. We go through everything. She brings up a lot of good points. And I take a deep breath and I type an email to the realtor. And I say, here's your options based on talking to the best of the best. The first one, file that lawsuit you're talking about. Like, I'm all for it. Like, let's hold these people accountable because obviously there is nothing moral, ethical, about this situation. I have never done this before. Most of the time I'm like, no, agreement. Let's find a way to get through things. Let's not go to court. I actually took a class to be a mediator. Not that I'm ever going to market that way, but and this is my personal belief, not that is that surveyors should do a better job of mediating situations. Like we shouldn't, if we know it's hostile, there's a lot of questions we can ask up front before we get too involved in a survey and people get entitled to a line that we survey to help them say, hey, I can see from the GIS, there might be a problem here. What are your thoughts about resolving that before we survey this line? How well do you know your neighbors? Like I really think, and as far as like talking to both sides, like I said, I never disclose anything that a client would not want me to disclose, but I do ask, like, can I talk to the neighbor? Or could you talk to the neighbor and let them know that you're having a survey done? Because, we're happy to explain the survey to both sides because our job is to look at the evidence, look at the facts. Measurements are black and white, right? Our job is to present this information. So that's not, a bias to any particular person. I think we can talk to both sides of a situation and help it not go. I mean, it's better than them talking to some attorney that just wants their money and wants them to fight. I mean, I had to tell my client today that I'm like, are you prepared to defend yourself if you won't agree with this neighbor or work out some kind of agreement with this neighbor? Because I said, that's where this is going. I think we need to do a better job of that. But that's my opinion. That's not we do not have an obligation to do that. That's not an ethical thing. I said, well, the other thing is if you don't want to do litigation, tell the client where to stick it, right? Like, what is this non-compliance document? This is not a thing. This is not a document that should have been recorded. Tell them, no, we're not following this. I could do what you ask. I could remap lot 4 as an outlot on a new CSM. I cannot do an affidavit of correction to change an outlot to a lot. So that might be specific to Wisconsin. And I don't know how many people even encounter outlots in other states. But Just throwing that out there. And like George brought up, we could go back, talk to the buyer of lot 5 and say, hey, could we buy just enough acres from you to make 3 acres? It would look like a stupid parcel, right? If you remember the shape of that, it would look stupid and impractical, but it would be compliant. We could do that. Or I'm like, since they're, love recording documents that aren't a thing, just record a document for lot 4. What are they going to do? Reject it?
Can't.
What are they going to do? But I said, your new buyer might have repercussions for that. But I mean, yeah. So that was kind of the 5 things that I presented to them. I guess, do you guys have any other ideas of what you would have told this realtor or any other thoughts? Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
Like number 1.
I was gonna say there's a couple things in John's.
Okay.
John's been throwing some stuff in the chat, but the owner could file an owner's affidavit to downgrade to an outlot. NOAD file a surveyor's affidavit downgrading the property. The other one was let's see, there's a couple things in here. But yeah, there's some good stuff in the chat. Well, I'll make sure I save this down. So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear all the comments.
I like Steve Martin's question about statement of statute of fraud.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, that one was up here a little while ago. Yeah, Steve said oh geez, that's way up here somewhere. Statute of frauds. How is basically where'd it go, Steve? Oh, must be up farther. How does the statute of frauds apply to leaving a restriction off the recorded map? So that was another good one too.
Yeah, we all learn from each other. Like I said, I don't have all the answers, and this was a wild scenario. A lot of documents I've never seen before. So realtor emails me back, says, hey, I looked at your email. I read everything you said. My client wants to hire an attorney and send a strongly worded letter demanding that the county undo the addendum and the affidavit of noncompliance. I was like, all right. I mean, then you could always sue them, right? I want that lawsuit. So this was funny. So the county, the cowards they are, corporate counsel cowards, filed an affidavit of compliance, which also I don't think is a thing, but they filed it saying, yup, it can be a lot. We're just gonna not fight because we kind of maybe realized that we made some bad choices here. And to talk about George, like what he talked about earlier. Oh, maybe I do mention that on a slide. I'll wait if it's not in there. Then I'll bring it up. What happened to the corporate counsel and the zoning administrator? So here's the affidavit of compliance, if you guys have never seen one, because I never saw one until this situation. And
it sounds similar to certificates of compliance that we get here in California for lots that are like an existing nonconformity to the local zoning regulations, right?
okay, so basically it's saying, is it like saying it's kind of grandfathered in?
Yes, basically,
compliant?
yeah.
Okay.
For example, if the lots were supposed to be 1 acre lots and the Department of Transportation, you know how those guys are, came along and took a 5-foot strip off the back of all these lots, and they were all right at 1 acre. Well, now they're under, but they're that transfer of ownership of that land was a legal process that was run through the whole procedures, right? So the reduction in size of those lots cannot make them illegal lots. So they get certificates of compliance saying that they are a adequate lot per the zoning.
So is this something that's filed with zoning, or is this something that's like recorded at the courthouse?
It goes through the local agency's processes and then gets recorded with the parcel.
Very nice. Yeah, so this actually got recorded with the Register of Deeds, which most of those documents are affecting real property, but I've never seen one for zoning, a zoning problem. This is kind of weird. Besides, maybe a holding tank agreement or something, this was kind of strange that the non-compliance and compliance got recorded as in the Register of Deeds. So basically this document said, whereas there was previously recorded a affidavit of nonconformance. And what's funny is the zoning administrator that signed this is not the zoning administrator that executed the noncompliance, because that guy was fired. He was walked out the door. Yeah. So I think it's funny that he said, whereas I executed, because he didn't. This is the new guy, and he's still there. He's a good zoning administrator. What's funny is if you read through this, there's so many misspellings.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing that
Looks
this
like
was drafted by a corporate counsel.
Yeah, that's what there's a few things in the chat. We're laughing at the abilities of their great QA/QC process.
And the fun part is they didn't spell my client's name right. That's not my client's name. It's not Bond. It's not even close to that word. It's so funny. And then they refer to lot 42 of Emerald Lake North subdivision. That's not the subdivision. It's the second edition. Not even the same plat. Like, just wow, guys, like you royally failed, but whatever. He's just repeating what was stated on the original affidavit of noncompliance, spelling errors and all. All right. So wow, guys, real professional job. Great work. So August 26th, 22. So like a year and a half later, he finally sells lot 4 as I originally surveyed it to begin with. And yeah, so I don't think I had a slide for it, but so like I said, the zoning administrator that did this, that approved my map and then filed the non-compliance, he was walked out the door. The corporate counsel, she was also walked out the door.
Oh,
because
good.
I'm sure, as many of you brought up, they're like, after that letter must have been like the kick in the butt. They're like, oh crap, they hired an attorney. We have like dollars in property that could possibly sue us now. It's like, why didn't you guys think about this sooner? Like, this was not a good idea. So I do have some questions. And one I don't know that I asked is like, I don't know who these corporate counsel attorneys think they are. That's what infuriates me the most. It's like they just act like they're God, that they can just make all these decisions with no accountability. So like I think was mentioned, I could have probably filed a complaint to the bar about some of this stuff, but we were trying to navigate this and we didn't have all the information. And if it was going to turn into a lawsuit, I didn't want to muddy the waters, making it look like I was going after these attorneys, kind of thing.
Sometimes showing too much cards too, when
Yeah.
going back and forth. But yeah, yeah.
So,
John says the corporate counsels are typically contract attorneys with no experience in real property law.
Hmm.
and I've never heard of this gal before, so I can't attest to her experience level or not, but the fact that they always took a month to like review things and give some sort of professional opinion shows a level of, for sure, not confidence in your abilities. Because if you're an attorney, like you should be able to look at something. If you're specializing in real estate representing a county, you should be able to give a pretty quick response.
I I think there's a lot of attorneys that aren't very knowledgeable about real property law. They portray themselves as being knowledgeable, but I just don't. At least down here where I'm operating, there's some good ones, no doubt, and I've worked with some great ones, but there are some that, oh boy.
Yeah. There's also a great question. Summer says, did you retain your own counsel while kind of dealing with this, or did you ever feel like you had to go down that?
I did not. I felt that I was protected under my client's attorneys. Like I was part
Yeah.
of the team. So I feel like if it went to litigation, I wouldn't need an attorney myself. I feel like I would have played more the role of an expert witness because I don't feel
Mhm.
like I would have been sued in this case because, my clients weren't upset with me and the county wasn't even upset with anything that I did. They're just like, oops, I guess we shouldn't have approved this kind of thing. And then they, instead of doing a reasonable thing like, granting a variance for this one lot, um, they made it their hill to die on. And it cost this lady attorney her job and I mean maybe her career, I don't know. You know, I it's hard to find attorneys, if they go work for a big firm, like I don't know where she is.
Yeah, that's fine.
Nettie, when your client purchased this lot to begin with before he subdivided it, did he have title insurance on it?
I would say, I mean, I don't know that, but I feel like most properties have title insurance. I
Well,
mean,
but the reason I ask is because this is a flag on the property, and if the
Yep,
title insurance didn't turn it up, how the hell is the surveyor supposed to turn it
Yep.
up?
yep, exactly.
I mean, that's another argument in your favor that says, look, how wide a net am I supposed to cast when I do research? Do I have to go look at all the zoning minutes and all the planning commission minutes and all the city council minutes from God knows when until now to find this stuff if it's not recorded in the right location? If title insurance didn't find it and he's damaged by this, what title insurance is going to go in there? They're going to fight like crazy to get their money back from the municipality for those damages because it wasn't recorded correctly. And they leave out they specifically exclude things that are a matter of record, right?
Mhm.
right.
So to me, if the title insurance isn't going to find it, how in the hell is the surveyor supposed to find it?
And I think if put on the stand, the county surveyor would say those words as well, because that was the conversation that we had. He's like, how is this enforceable? Right? That was his first words to me. It's like, how is this enforceable? Um, and then him and I had a conversation before I gave this presentation. He was just sick about the whole situation because he just felt like this is not right. This is not enforceable. There's just so many aspects about this situation, the documents that were filed incorrectly, the way they handled this situation, they opened themselves to a lot of liability. And the fact is, this addendum is still recorded. You can't unrecord a
Yep,
document.
that's right.
Yeah.
You can record pretty much anything,
Right.
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
push comes to, because like what the register of deeds said is they're not looking at what the content of a document is, just so that the form is, all the pieces that have to be there are there. Otherwise, we wouldn't have problems with descriptions that don't mean crap. They just
Yeah,
like the
exactly.
description is there,
Yeah.
not that the description makes any sense. So the recording document type of thing, that's a non-issue, because if it's not linked to the chain of title in some way, shape, or form that makes sense, you can't be expected to find it. Plus,
Yeah, but
that's
now it
something,
is.
yeah. Well, now, but that's after the fact. Okay.
Right.
The other thing is, that a restriction that was just put on this developer for that particular subdivision, or is that typical for all the other subdivisions around that area?
It
Okay.
was for this specific subdivision.
So by looking at a subdivision next door that's got smaller lots, you wouldn't be anything there that would imply that 3 acres was the minimum lot size that was put on as a restriction on this particular subdivider.
Correct.
So I mean, so it's to a certain extent arbitrary and capricious, okay? Because they're not following a land development plan or a type of land use plan. If they're not making it homogeneous throughout the area, you can't just do it patchwork like that.
Yeah.
You can't do land use by constraints on individual developers. There has to be a plan with respect to that. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, and as a surveyor, how are you supposed to find this stuff out?
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, Gary, and that's like Summer brought that up. So this document was recorded right before I submitted that preliminary plat or preliminary CSM. So, like Summer said, I could have, if I would have researched, I would have found this document that was now encumbering my property and basically preventing me. Well, but see, I don't know. Like my opinion is, I read through this addendum, all it says is that here's the meeting minutes and that there's certain restrictions that were put on these lots. That's all it says. So and there's nobody that signed it. So is this document still enforceable? It's an addendum. I don't know what that means. I asked Renee Powers, like, can you do an addendum to a plat? She said no. You can do like an addendum to a condominium. You can't modify a plat. You could do an affidavit, or you could file covenants or restrictions, but then you would need permission of all those landowners. You can't just do it now.
And also, how much is your time worth?
Yeah.
I mean, like, do you have like all day, every day to go back in time and figure out what may or may not be happening?
Right. It's not on my radar to go back to 2000 meeting minutes and look at this stuff. Definitely not.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's asinine.
Yeah, right. Go for it, George.
So I guess maybe I'm lucky. I've been licensed for over 40 years and I've never run into anything quite this convoluted. So my suggestion would be, if that's the way things are in Wisconsin, maybe you should come out here to the Wild Wild West.
Either that or you should come here to Wisconsin, George.
Come to Texas.
Oh, no.
It's weirder.
This is definitely not the normal. I have to say, I have done hundreds of CSMs. It's always, like I said, submit the map within 5 business days. You're like, oh, looks good, or yep, oh, you got to make these changes. Just really routine. This was completely an off the wall scenario. And I spent a lot more time on this job after the fact than I did actually completing the survey, right? So that was kind of like where it's kind of some of these questions came from. From an ethical standpoint, I already did the survey. Did I have any obligation to help this client at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a totally great question. That is a and it's kind of loaded. It almost depends
Yeah, it
on
is. It
the
is.
scenario, right?
I mean, morally, like I would hope you would say yes, but
Yes.
ethically,
Okay. Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Well, like I said in the chat, you don't know what you don't know until you how
Right.
much you know. Oh, I don't even know how I said it. Uh,
The more you know, the more you
the more
realize
you
what you
know,
don't know.
the more you realize what you don't know.
Exactly.
But how do you
Unfortunately,
know when to crawl out of the hole, right? We call it the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, you don't.
And that's the hard part is that once you get deep enough into it, it's like, wow, this has cost us a freaking fortune trying to do the right, trying to be morally, ethically, like principally everything, do it right. And it's like, who's going to pay us for that?
Well,
Right?
and what's our first goal as surveyors? We're our job is to solve problems,
Follow,
not create them. And
sure.
this is a problem, and I'm with Nettie. I don't know how the heck you solve that because it's not really a survey issue. It's a county planning commission or issue. It's a county government issue. It's not really a survey problem. She did nothing wrong. She did nothing to damage her client or any of their neighbors, as far as I can tell. Only the county's done that.
Yeah. You got to go to your next slide, Eddie, because it's such a good one. And I even talk about it just from a business standpoint.
yeah.
Once there you go.
Here's
You're
where I
only as
get
strong as
really,
the weakest link. Yeah.
yeah, I get really philosophical at the end here.
Well,
Yep.
if it makes you feel better, Nettie, you can't put a price on a good time.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, looking back, it was worth it for the entertainment factor and the experience.
Experience.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely stretched my abilities as a professional on how to properly navigate this, doing the best thing for the public as a whole, and trying to do the best thing for my client, without overstepping or potentially putting myself in a spot where I could bring liability on myself. Um, you know,
That's what I was just about to say. How many hats you just wore, right? You wore the surveyor hat, you wore the protect the public hat, you wore your expert witness hat, right?
Yep.
Trying to bring this in from totally different avenues of all
yeah,
that. So the amount I'm with you just from the presentation from us to learn from you
Yes.
is awesome to know, you hate when people have to go through it, but you also learn so much when somebody does. And if they're willing to pass that on, it's important. So, I mean, for those that need ethical PDHs for your renewals, you just got a good 2 hour ethics presentation.
Hey, that's all we need in Nevada, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah.
we're
I
2 hours.
could I could do another 2 years.
That's right. I love
I'm still recovering from my last trip to Nevada.
it. I know so Women's Surveyor Summit is October 23rd to the 26th, and we've always talked about the needing an ethics presentation too. So maybe as a backup, Nettie, if I don't find somebody, but
Yeah, I mean, because I don't just have this scenario. I have more.
yeah, I can imagine. I can
Yeah,
imagine.
because I don't know if it's because of who I am now. Like I get all the difficult ones. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy solving the puzzle, right?
Mhm.
Um, but I I almost kind of like I said, I'm navigating an adverse possession deal right now, and I kind of had to do some tough love on my client because I said. Because I guess, and this is some word of advice to some of you that don't have as much experience surveying. I do every survey thinking, how will I defend this in court?
Yep, exactly. We talk about that a lot. Must be defendable when it leaves the door.
If none of you listen to any Roundtable Tuesday discussions, when you have those really tough surveys and you're not sure what to do, that's a question I always come back to, like, what can I defend in court? What can I be proud of? What can I stand by? Where is the evidence really leading me? Because, sometimes the best answer isn't always obvious when you got multiple good answers, or multiple possibilities.
Yep.
I had a situation recently where I had the county surveyor relook at a section corner that I believed was in the wrong location, and his conclusion was, yes, it's definitely in the wrong location, but there's 5 different arguments about where it could be. So I'm not going to move it. And I respect that response because he did a lot of research in that. But there's a good example where it's like, yeah, there's a lot of places it could be, and you can make an argument for, but what would you go on the stand for?
Yeah, it's already locally accepted. There's too many people relying on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
John kind of summed it up the best. Everybody's got great job on your presentation, but John says, excellent presentation of a problem that sucks.
Yeah.
yeah, I have one more, like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna back up one slide because I have to read it because it's good. So this is my philosophical side. Ethics can be a touchy topic as opinions and facts often blur based on our moral worldview. We talked about that earlier. It can be painful as we grow as professionals and realize something we decided we thought was best in the past, and that we could have done it better if we knew what we know now. It can be difficult to call out someone when you believe them to be unethical, especially if they are in a position of authority or someone that you respect. In this case, I was dealing with corporate counsels. Calling them out could have had very scary consequences.
Yeah.
While I have made light of some aspects of this situation in order to engage you in the story, this was a tough series of events to see play out to the end. Like, this is a scenario like no other. But if you got nothing else out of my presentation, so those of you who are sleeping, have your screens off or whatever, I want to leave you with this. Each one of us has the opportunity every day to strengthen the reputation of the surveying profession or be a weak link in the chain. It is our personal responsibility to be a moral person. It is our professional responsibility to be an ethical one. And that's how and obviously we can keep talking, but that's when I thought about all this, like, that's where my mind was at.
Nice.
You should come out to Reno next weekend.
Yes.
Just in case somebody cancels. And if nobody does, we'll still make sure you get fed and have plenty of drink. So
Jerry was on the hook, and he just got off this weekend. So he was a backup for CFEDs.
Yeah, Jerry's always good.
That's right. That's right.
You'd like Reno. You should come out. It's pretty. It was.
I'll be in Vegas for the women's summit.
Well, Vegas is a little different than Reno.
I know.
Yes, Reno has 4 seasons. We don't.
And we have trees.
Yeah, you have trees.
You have trees? Oh, yeah.
And
Reno's a little more sedate.
That's awesome.
Trees is a 4-letter word.
The skiing's still good.
That's awesome.
Hey, Trent, I sent you an email. Check that quote out.
Okay, will do. That was great. Great job. Do you want to go back to your last slide if you want, just so everybody can grab that QR code if you wanted, but that was fun. Thanks for putting it out there. And
thanks, Nettie.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome, everyone. And obviously, if you have more comments or questions about this, you are welcome to reach out to me anytime. I don't want to say like I mentor other surveyors a lot, but I do have conversations with a lot of my fellow surveyors. If we have a hard situation, like, we should be able to just call each other and say, Allison's probably the most common. She'll call me and be like, hey, what would you, hypothetically,
Yeah,
but based on a real situation, like, what would you do in this scenario? And I think it's great to have that relationship with other surveyors. I really think we're only benefiting our profession as a whole to help each other out that way.
Jerry's about to chime in, but I was about to say the same stuff. Go for it,
That's the kind of audience we're trying to build for Roundtable Tuesdays and stuff. So if you say you've got other situations like this, and we're trying to get the Young Surveyors Network involved in that process also, at least as participants. So we're welcoming all sorts of presentations to come in, to do this kind of stuff, to have these kinds of discussions, particularly.
Yep.
So the people that don't have resources to turn to see that there are other people that can give them feedback on situations.
100%. Yep. Growing stronger together. That's for sure. Awesome. Anybody got any more questions, or I know we ran long tonight, but it was worth running long for. I loved it. But if not, like Jerry said, we've got 2 more this week. So roundtables tomorrow, roundtable Tuesday tomorrow, and then Wisdom Wednesday, chapter 8, as well on Wednesday. So
I see Dave
I love
put
it.
his hand up.
What's that?
Dave put his hand up.
Oh,
You have a question, Dave?
gone.
No, I was just clapping. Thank you very much. It was fantastic. Loved it. Every minute of it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
All right,
you for the
everybody.
good question. Good night, everyone.
Yep. Have a great week.
Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.